this evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm delighted to welcome Rod Sherwin, who's a lean and agile practitioner, as well as solution focus, and he is going to be introducing to us a tool that we can all use and learn, and at the same time we're going to have some discussions around SF. So we're using solution focus as the topic, and my heart stopped there for a second as Rod disappeared from the screen, but has appeared again. Okay. So good morning, welcome Rod, and I'm going to hand over to you now. Thanks.
Thanks, John. So yeah, Lean Coffee is a structured discussion format that I want to share with you today. It's something we use a lot in the agile space, but I find every time I've introduced it in whatever context, people find it incredibly useful. It does contain a lot of things about agile, but you can know nothing about agile and still find it a very useful format. And for those of you who had an experience of open space, Lean Coffee is kind of its baby brother. It's a meeting you can have that doesn't have an agenda. You actually develop the agenda as you go along in a similar way that you do in open space. So I've posted in the chat window, and some people have joined since now, so I'll post the link again. In the chat window is a link to what we're going to use as a Kanban board or a way of organising our discussion. And if you open that link in a browser, you find there's kind of 3 columns sitting there. There's topics on the left, there's discussing, which has got nothing in it at the moment, and then done on the right. And in topics, we've actually brainstormed just a few ideas, and all of you are now welcome to add to those topics by pressing on the plus button next to the topics. And our theme for this discussion is just SFiO, Solution Focus in Organisations. So maybe you've got a question, maybe you've got an exciting experience, maybe this is just something you've learned lately. Any idea, thought that you have around solutions focus in organisations, just click on that plus button next to the topics and create a little, what we call a card for that. So what we're going to do, I'll give you just a couple of minutes to post in some topics there. Maybe you just want to read through the ones that are already there. And after we've got a few more topics posted in there, we'll then vote on them. And the voting is, you know, we're going to have a limited amount of time. So which for you is the highest priority topic that you want to discuss? And occasionally ideas do emerge as we're discussing other things, and we may shuffle the priorities as we go. I'll probably just give a quick explanation of Ideas Board. It is just a free online tool that can be used for Lean Coffee. There are many tools out there. There's some you have to pay for. Ideas Board I find is good because you don't have to pay for it. And it's kind of custom built for these sort of discussions. You don't have to use it just for Lean Coffee. You can use it for any sort of tracking of progress work. The only thing you have to be aware of is anybody with the link can see the content. So you probably don't want to use it for commercially sensitive stuff. All right, well, it looks like we've got, what's that, a nice even dozen to play with. Now what we're going to do, as I said, there's a voting phase. So down the bottom left-hand corner of each topic, oh, we got lucky 13 now, baker's dozen. Down the bottom left-hand corner of each of the cards, you can see a little plus and a 0 or plus and a 1. And that's someone voting on it. So now is your opportunity to vote. And basically, we're just going to have 3 votes each. So out of all those topics, what are your key 3 votes? Now with Lean Coffee, there is no magic rule about the number of votes. 3 is just a number I'm picking tonight. So, but you want to actually limit it so that people don't vote for everything. So now thinking about, you've got 3 votes out of all those 13 topics. Which are the 3 that you're most keen to discuss in the time we have available? So click on the little plus in the lower left-hand corner of a card, and it should allow you to add a 1 to it. So use your 3 votes wisely. And yes, there is a bit of first mover advantage. We see a number go up one, we think, oh yeah, that's a good topic, we're going to add something to that. So you're allowed to vote for your own topic as well. You put it up there because you thought it was a good idea. John, I might just do a quick screen share if that's okay, and then I can show how it's work.
Yeah, please do.
All right, is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
So if I wanted to vote for a short introduction to this one, I would click on that one. I would click on the vote up button, and it says updated, and then I would close that one and then vote on another one.
Okay.
All right, everybody used their 3 votes?
No, but I'm fine.
It's hard. It's always a hard choice. It's just part of one of the, this is the way that, one of the ways in which this relates to Agile, in terms of Agile project delivery, is all about trying to deliver the highest business value first. And that means some things are not going to get delivered. So what we're doing here, we're using voting to decide what is of highest value to the group. And it does mean that some things will get missed out. But depending on how we go for time, we may actually get through all of it. But anyway, keeping an eye on time, what I'll now do in the top right-hand corner of the ideas board, I'll resort this by voting. So it will actually shuffle the board around so that we've got the highest level items across the top. So we've got 3 that are the same numbers, so we'll just work our way through those. Now we're actually going to time box the discussion of each item. And to do that, you know, I'm just going to put 5 minutes on my timer here, and we'll discuss the topic for that 5 minutes once we start the timer. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, we get to do a bit of democratic voting to decide whether we want to continue with this topic or whether we've had enough of it and we want to move on to one of the other ones. And the way we do this voting is, imagine the old gladiators in the Roman arena. This is called Roman voting. It's either, yes, we want to continue with this discussion on this topic, so we put another 5 minutes on the clock, or no, I've had enough of this topic, I'm happy to move on. And to avoid sort of confirmation bias on doing this, we all hold our hands up like this, and then we go 1, 2, 3, and whatever your vote is. So we all show our vote at the same time. So I'll move the first topic into discussing. So we're only discussing one topic at the time, and I'll start our timer now.
Sorry, Rod, could you repeat the topic, please?
It was, how do you adapt other change frameworks, e.g. PROSCII, using solutions focused? So yeah, who put that one up and wants to just...
I did.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, just want to expand on that a bit for us?
Yeah, I've been following PROSCII for a long time, and they've got an enormous framework for change management in many organizations, and they train a lot of people and do lots of webinars. And there was one element of that I particularly like around the starter projects, building a core team, particularly if you've got large groups of people, a core team of cross-functional people who engage in helping you understand better what works best, etc., for the teams. And you can engage them using solution focus so that they help you design the program, so that once it gets into implementation, doing workshops or whatever, they're already engaged and are helping you by talking the same language. Of course, we're talking their language, but you get so many more engaged people by doing it through the core team. Does that make sense?
So that core team, Alan, that's actually meant to be the people who can help you create the change?
Yeah, you usually, you want it definitely to be no more than 4 or 5 people, cross-functional, but also a little bit of hierarchy. And you ask questions like, so when you've done change management or whatever the project is, I do a lot of facilitation of strategic planning and stuff like that. When you've done this before, what worked? How did you get people engaged? Oh, tell us, what would you see you using from those resources again in this project? And usually you put together a wee bit of an agenda for the project, the workshops, but you keep asking them solution-focused questions about how they would see it, having it work for them.
Okay.
Maybe it would be helpful for me, Ellen, if you could give a direction or what we are discussing for right now. So
I
think you have a tons of experience, and what would be, what's your aim now?
Oh, I was just hoping that we could have a discussion about what people have seen in other areas. I'll just pick PROSCII as an example.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Alan, it's John. Just one thing I found is people tend to overcomplicate change processing or change processes, and a lot of people are trying to just make money out of coming at different ways of expressing change management and such like. One of the strengths I've found in solutions focus is the focus on small steps. And I define change whenever I talk to organisation as one of two things. Tomorrow you either do something differently or you think differently. And it's as simple as that. And I prefer seeing change expressed in terms of evolution, and that you're progressively improving each day and you're doing it in small steps and you're naturally embracing change. You can pick up any change management methodology you want. What I'm finding more and more is rather than adapting that at all, I'm just putting solutions focus underneath it as a sort of foundation.
Yeah.
And I really like the bit, what do you see this will deliver? So where do you see it going? And what small steps can you identify? And just focus on the small steps. And then you will change it, because I think a lot of people are fearful of change, because they think they see it as they're vulnerable or it's got a threat to their position or whatever. But the one thing I really like about SF is the positive side of it. It's very hard to go into a good SF conversation and come out with negative vibes. I've been doing this recently with a company, and I've just found...
Sorry, John, just got to interrupt you there. We're hitting a timer. So let's just do a quick vote. And, normally I like to let people try and finish the thought, but it seems like you had a really good in-depth discussion. So let's just do a quick vote. And if we're all keen to hear more, it's majority rule. So if we're all keen, we'll continue on this topic. But if not, we'll move on. And sometimes it'll be just another 2 minutes on the clock as needed. Anyway, let's do a quick vote. So holding your hands up like this. And this means I want to continue voting, continue discussing this topic. This means I don't want to continue discussing. So we've got 1 no, and we've got probably a majority vote. All right, we'll put another 5 minutes on the clock. And sorry, John, if you please continue on after you come off mute.
No, that's right, mate. Yeah, no, I'd almost finished anyway. I was just saying that I find I'm probably a fairly positive person anyway. I've just found that using SF has emphasised that positive nature, if you find, and I use a number of different tools depending on what I'm consulting, and I'm trying. Initially, I looked at, do I adapt this to embrace SF? And then I found what was happening was that SF was just a foundation to all of these. It was a mindset rather than a methodology. I don't know if others find that as well.
What I understood so far in Alan's reasoning, it might be useful to make a language, to offer a language for the change they want to go through. And to me, the question is SF a clear enough language that the client sees there is something I can hold on. So just that's what's relevant to me from this question, and I'm not sure if it's what you're suggesting, Ellen, but something like that. And I see within this SF field some offers for creating a recognizable language within SF, but somehow making it specific, like the impetus of John Brooker, where we try to give words to it and not just always talk the client's language. And I think if the client orders a language by saying, I want this PROSCII or whatever, then we probably can follow it on larger route, because that's what they are offering. But what do we offer if they don't offer something? Is it?
Let me give you another example. Working with a German manufacturing company here in Canada, industrial business, we were, their strategic plan had been ignored for half a year, almost a year. And so we're working with, because there was complications with the union, so we're working with management and the union on getting the plan underway. And so we were doing pretty well. And I said to the folks at a certain point, in the factory, you must use some kind of planning, day-to-day planning models, whatever. And one of the guys puts his hands up and he says, yeah, we use storyboard. I said, oh, tell me about storyboard. So I said, would it be useful if we used that? And I said, where did you get that from? He said, I stole it from a company I used to work with. And so I said, after they described how it works, I said, supposing we were to continue our conversation using storyboard, how would you see that being useful to you? And they bought into it right away. We ended up with lots of storyboards on flip charts in the room, so they could see change happening and the narrative shifting in front of them with something they were already familiar with.
I think, can I pitch in something? For me, just listening is it seems to be three things. One is, if the client doesn't have anything, they're kind of not wedded to anything, then use SF. If they've got a tool that they like to use, how can we apply SF to that? If it's a tool, though, that takes you into deep analysis and problem solving, then I guess that's where we run into an issue. So that, for me, are the 3 points.
I find I learned an approach to change called lean change management, and I found it aligned very easily with SF in terms of the experimental mindset. There was insights, options, and experiments. And insights was kind of more analysis, but we could use that for figuring out what's worked, what's future perfect, things like that. Options were insights. Options were some experiments we can do, and insights, options, and experiments. So options were different small steps that we could take, and then you shape those into experiments to see what actually moved you in the direction that you wanted to go. And from that, you would then gather more insights, come up with more options, do more experiments. So I found that focus on what's working, do more of it. If something's not working, do something different. For me, aligns very easily with SF in terms of an approach to change. Thank you. So I'll move that one into done. So hopefully you'll see that update on your screen, and then I'll go for the next one that was voted a 4. And this topic is how to use SF for initiating conversations between non-talking groups in society. An idea for SF World Day 220. So whose topic was that? I'd like to expand on that a little bit for us.
Yeah, that was me. I'm kind of worried of what I see in several countries. Mainly, I'm from Hungary, and I'm living in Switzerland. In both countries, I think it's crucial that people who not naturally talk with each other somehow have chances to talk to each other. So I cut a bit of thinking, and I recognize that the next SF World Day is on a Sunday. So 3rd of May is 2020 is on a Sunday. And I started to think of, it could be a pattern for that day to allow, and under several good reasons, to let people come together and get a better understanding of each other, of what's important to them, and somehow get closer or more related. And that's the broad idea, and I don't know what's useful here and how could you help me. I would be helped if I have some comments on or possible examples, and feel if you also think it's a good chance. I'm convinced that solution-focused frames for discussions or also for meetings in a broad sense, the solution focus supports that and facilitate that.
Kathleen, can you say a little bit more about what you mean by non-talking groups?
I'm just try to put it short that people who don't naturally have a issue to meet personally and talk to each other. In Hungary, for example, these are Orbán voters and not non-Orbán voters who vote for the usually for the Regierung, government, and who would vote against. That would be non-talking, who would not talk to each other, because the first sentence of the one group would cause you to not wanting to listen to that. So that's what I mean. But it can be broader than that.
I have
Hong Kong springs to mind.
yeah. I think there are different stuff like that, and Trump and whatever. Yeah, Naomi, you were.
Yeah, I have an idea that just when you were talking that occurred to me, because I'm really passionate about this too. So in Sheffield, for the most recent Solution Focused World Day, I went into a homelessness hostel and did some group therapy for free. And I've never done that before, and it worked really well, because what happened, that people say always happens, is they supported one another, so I could then pull out within 10 minutes. It was brilliant. But what I'm also working in solicitors, and so bigger organizations, sort of more corporate organizations, and what I'm always thinking about and have been for 20 years is how we get them to communicate. Because, so for example, hosting an event, I don't know if this would be relevant in your country, where you say to a business and you say to somebody who's experienced homelessness, somebody vulnerable, if you come to this event, you can learn something unique from that person's perspective in business that might be useful to help you exit homelessness. And if you're in business and we could have a panel, then you could learn something, because somebody who's been street homeless does about 400 things in a day. And I always say to myself and to people, you know, if those people were put in a business position, their resourcefulness and unique ability to solution build is profound, I find, when I work with these people. And if you could say, so you could learn, so both of those parties could learn something really unique in that setting if you could create a safe event. And that would be the hook for people to attend, and that would create more, there would be ripple effects in society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
That's my idea.
Can I give you an example where I did it with a town, a small town near Toronto? The downtown merchants, through a friend of mine, asked for some help because they weren't getting very much enthusiasm from the town council. And the town was growing because lots of people were moving there. They did have one very difficult thing, in that there was a nuclear processing plant in the harbour, Lake Ontario, and there was a site near the town where years ago they dumped a lot of the nuclear waste. Needless to say, there was a lot of cleanup problems and a lot of protest stuff going on. When we did the session for the town to plan how to liven up the downtown merchants area, we made sure, of course, that the town councillors and various elements of the community came. We went out of our way to invite the cleanup protesters, and they came and they engaged, and they were a very powerful component of the change. And fortunately, we were able to stay away from their angle on fixing the town, the downtown merchants. I think it's really critical. In fact, I published a piece recently, which I learned from a banker about LGBTQ in Canada, where this person said, you have to have people complaining about something, then you need to have some advocacy, then you need to have some planning or legislation, then you have to implementation planning, and then you have to socialize it. And in each case, you need people who initially disagree a lot with you while you learn about what it is they want. So I'll stop talking, but hopefully I'll be able to share that all with you sometime.
When our children were smaller, they went to school or played soccer. And in these events, when the children did something together, all the parents came together. And there I met people I think I wouldn't talk, or I don't know, I think I wouldn't met, because they are different, whatever. And I think maybe to start doing something together than talking together, and to have something in common, like we would like to play something, or I don't know, a common goal would help to meet people, I think. Mm-hmm. And then the talk can start. Mm-hmm. So, and my children are now bigger, and nevertheless I have contact to people I think I wouldn't met if yes, so that would be maybe an idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a good example of where has it worked in the past, Ruth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do wonder. I am somebody who enjoys going to sort of events where I get the opportunity to meet people that I wouldn't normally meet. There's a once a month event that is held in Melbourne where you have a 3-course dinner, and over that 3-course dinner, there are 6 questions that are given to the table, and you just discuss those questions, and they're quite provocative, deliberately provocative questions. But I do wonder that, you know, the people who will go to those events are people who are open to having those sort of discussions anyway. I like Ruth's idea where those people who are more polarised, it'll take some other common, some other common goal to get them together.
The beginning of that 5-step process, it's really important to get the activists of various kinds together with whoever the core group is that wants to make progress. And I've done it done it many times. People coming into the room expecting to be angry, and particularly if you do a stakeholder consultation, and you start off with, so what pleases you most about how well we're doing in this town or whatever, to help them find some common links. And then you can start talking about what it is that, not what you're angry about, but what it is that you want to be different, what you want to be better, and so on and so on. I find it relatively easy to help teams of very different perspectives who are frankly angry at each other, to very quickly move forward and find what it is they have in common.
Mm-hmm. How do you, I'm taking it back a step, Alan, how do you get them to want to be in the same room in the first place? Or what's that? How do you get them in the room to want to be in the room in the first place?
Invitations, expecting not everybody to turn up, and they do. There's just so many things you can get to. I have a reputation for doing these stakeholder consultations, which is very common language, certainly in North America. But building them in a way that the people with different perspectives can see that there's going to be value for them. And, you know, I often say to them, incidentally, we're not here for buttercups and butterflies to fall in love with each other. We're not going to that's not going to happen. What we want to do is find out what we've got in common. And even if it's just a small thing, to help them initially at the conversation to open up.
Okay. Thank you. That's time again on that one. So let's vote again. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's pretty even. No maybes. You're either up or down. It's pretty even split. Did anybody have one last thought they wanted to add? Otherwise, we'll move.
Maybe that's me, that I got quite a lot of it. And right now I'm at having a brunch together, kind of, where people bring something. So the entry ticket is to bring something with you. And there would be rounds of conversations and eatings where you can discuss what's on the table and why would you bring it to a brunch. So that's right now the top state I have.
Thanks, Katie. All right, next topic up is what's an exercise that you use in a meeting or workshop to give people a taste of SF? You know, very often we do solutions focus in a guerrilla way. You know, as John talked about, it's just the foundation. It's part of the way we work. But just occasionally I get asked, oh, you know, what's this FS thing? And my preference is always to give people an experience of it rather than try to explain it. So I'm wondering if you have a sort of, you know, probably 10 to 15 minute exercise or a couple of questions that you ask to give people a taste of SF or something similar. I'm seeing lots of nods. This will be good.
My colleague Brian Thornton introduced me to this, so it's his credit to Brian Thornton for it. But is when you do speed dating, so you face one another, and you see Ingrid said that. You do speed dating and you say to the person in front of you, I usually do it, he does it for about a minute, I usually do it for less than that, half a minute, but you say one thing that you've noticed about that person in that moment that tells you you'll enjoy working with them, and because it's about noticing, then that's the beginning of getting people to think in a solution focused way about noticing people's capacities and resources and complements that are specific.
Nice. Thank you.
Cool. What I really enjoy doing is meeting groups of 3 by chance, and let them talk about one thing they really enjoyed or felt as a maybe even little success during last week in their work. And after that, so like 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, and then introduce resource gossip and let them mention behind the back or just not directly talking to the person, those qualities they recognize in within this 1 minute story, which they enjoy having in this colleague. And I comment while introducing it on focusing our attention, picking what we are talking about in the first place, and how do we respond to each other's stories. And I think these are 3 quite key elements within SF, and I can make it in 15 minutes, and they got an experience, and most of them are smiling and surprised how much the others get from their 1 minute story.
I haven't been using in a meeting as such. I had a small interaction with Teams where I tried, and also non-solution focused people, and I just gave them a short 5-minute introduction to how I was working, just to get them to understand. My presentation was that this is the way I work, and you might find my questioning a bit odd at times. So I just wanted to explain how come I ask these questions. And then I used the quadrant of Hazel Moon. Do you know that? The full one. May I share to you just a picture? Just to give you an idea shortly. So I just showed them a picture. I made this on a flip chart, you know, and just say, so we're here because we want the team to be working better, and that will be obviously in a preferred future because we don't know how yet to come. That's what we are discussing. When I'm asking questions, I very much like to ask about what you're doing already, because I believe you're an excellent team. You're really working good. So I would be interested in digging in what you're doing well. And I introduced it, of course, I'm here because I know that you have had some problems with each other and you have difficulties with cooperation. That's not a secret. And of course, you will feel obliged to address that because we put the monkey on the table or address the elephant or whatever you call it. And of course, I know you would be anxious to what could come in the future. So just to let you know that when I'm asking questions, I'm not ignoring that because I really want to make us use efficient use of our time together. So I'm very interested in how would it look like. So if you have problems, I would really be interested in looking how would it look like when the problem is not there? What would you do differently? And how you would? And if you're anxious about new problems arising, yeah, then how would you go around with it that it doesn't happen? What would you notice instead? And I found it really, really helpful. That was it. And non-solution focused people were completely, yes, of course. And what I realized that I didn't expect, they started to addressing it themselves by having discussion. It was a team about 8-9 people. They have small discussion in groups. How would our team look like when it's really perfect? Everything's running well, what we are doing, who's doing what. And I heard in the group several times they say, oh, now we're talking about problems again, but that's not what we want. You know, it's not that what Jesper, the consultant, want. It's not that what we want. So they were really taking it in, and I realized, hey, it makes sense to them to talk like this. And to me, it took me 5 minutes introduction, a completely old-fashioned teaching way, just saying, I want to make my work transparent to you, so this is how I work. And I really hope that you find it okay, and please address it if it doesn't make sense to you. And they bought it all in. It was amazing how easy it was, and it made sense to them.
Yes, but what you told right now is, of course, familiar to me, but the way you told it made me listen carefully. So it's something, it's not teaching what you do. It's like you show your interest. And for me, that makes a difference. You are interested in the people. And it's not that you are interested in, that's the way I can express it. It touched me. Thank you for this.
Jesper, could you tell again the author of this model? I didn't got it.
I'll find the link to a blog post that Hazen made where she explains it, and I'll put it in the chat line. Just 1 minute.
Ruth,
thank you.
And everybody, if you go into the latest interaction on
right.
the SFiO website, you'll see a video of her explaining it.
Oh.
So,
and it's a very stupid remark, but she's coming to Europe for 2 days training in September. You can come to Budapest. Sorry.
That's great. It's a good way to get people to know about it. But yeah, it's there's a video on the interaction, the latest interaction that you can get. If you haven't got that, I'll very quickly go on and put it into the chat room.
Yeah, do that, please.
So,
yeah.
Sometimes this does happen where a topic dies, you sort of, the discussion just naturally comes to an end, even though we've still got 2 minutes on the clock. How can SF be used to motivate teams? Who put this one up?
That was me.
The topic was, how can SF be used to motivate teams?
Yeah, I'm just interested to hear other people's views. I often get called in to work with teams who are not working well. And I get lots of feedback from managers about how they're not working well, etc. And I try very hard to ignore it and just go into the room as, you know, this is a team that can solve it. But I'm just interested to hear other people's experience with how they remotivate teams, how they use SF to remotivate teams.
John, one thing I found interesting, I did this just last week, and found that it was very much a mixed team in terms of a mix of Australians, Asians, Europeans, and such like. Very quiet to start with, but after a couple of hours, they were pretty fired up. My issue for the company was how are they going to maintain momentum? Because I don't want to be there forever. I'm there literally to go in, like the blue touch paper, and then stand back and get out and let the company take it forward. So the guys are seeing a change. They're seeing guys being motivated, but it's more not so much how you keep that team motivated, but how do you keep the leaders who will subsequently try and motivate them aligned, and to maintain that momentum. That's the bit I think isn't quite cracked yet.
Just wondering, John, what did you do in the workshop that at least initially got them motivated?
It's all right. We did. We were doing initially a little bit on team building and getting to know each other. A couple of exercises that were just getting to know each other individually and as a team. And then we did a 2-hour session on innovation, and that's when they really started to come out of themselves. And from what started off as being really quite quiet and having to almost pulling teeth, but by the end of it, I was almost saying very little because they were coming up with all the ideas themselves. I was actually using John's innate model that he'd had in his book, I'll give you a plug here, in the Creative Gorilla, that I went back to and sort of started using some of that, which was effective. But now, as I say, by the end of the session, they were all chatting amongst themselves and wanted to say, okay, how do we take this further? And that's where I wanted to say, well, okay, I can come in and do another session for you, but ultimately someone within the company, some facilitator within the company has got to pick this up, whether the facilitator within your own team or somewhere else in the company, it doesn't matter, but you've got to learn to motivate this internally yourselves. Solutions focus is really being a bit of a penny dropping moment for them. They're starting to see how positively the people are starting to speak more. They readily get away from the problem space, and they've started to identify how much they were just finding themselves in the problem space and staying there, just consuming themselves with problem talk.
In terms of just two very specific small activities that I found really useful recently in doing workplace well-being in organizations is solution focuses. Sort of near the beginning of the workshop, just putting a flip chart on the board with 4 quadrants saying strategic, and then communication, and then organizational change, and then project management. So sort of 4 broad themes along those lines, and then just giving people little different colored post-it notes and saying, what do you notice that you already really like about the way that your organization does each of these things? So it feels like it's quite a simple, practical way, but people are so unused to thinking in that way, aren't they, that they start to notice that there is something they like about their organization. And then later in the afternoon, after lots of other activities, I get loads of visual, so like shiny silver card, like a palm tree that's made out of plastic and Lego and all those kinds of things, and ask people to in small teams to create a picture of a physical representation of their perfect organization. And people say things like, oh, we'd have a gym. And just one thing that I do before that, which I think leads to it, is I give them the Google and Netflix case studies of how they manage their organizations and say, what do you notice that you like and what's too radical and what might you take from this? And then they do the physical representation.
Well, we are actually 1 minute to 8 o'clock, 1 minute to the top of the hour, according to my clock. So we are out of time. And again, this is where Lean Coffee gives you a good example of how Agile works in terms of there's always going to be some things left undone. But we've used our time, the time that we had available, to discuss the topics that we thought were most important in the time we had available. And the number of people on this call is probably the maximum that you want to use for a Lean Coffee, just because 3 to 9 people means everyone gets a chance to use to have some bandwidth, to have some airtime in the discussion. Once you get past about 9 people, it's probably worth breaking into 2 groups. I mean, I go to a Tuesday morning Lean Coffee. It's been running in Melbourne for something like 14 years. We can run that with maybe 12 to 15 people around a table, but often people at the end say, gee, I wish we'd split the table. And the way you might do that, if you're using physical cards rather than a virtual board, so you can do this with just 3x5 cards around a coffee table. You don't need the virtual board. We're only doing that because we're all distributed. But using simple post-it notes around a table, you can put the 3 columns on the table, use the timer exactly the same format. Works just as well.
How has this helped you? Let's give Rod some positive feedbacks.
I'll go first for Rod. Rod, thank you very much. I've been a fan of Agile and many other similar tools, and it's even more evidence that we can use other models, elements of other models, and particularly things like Idea Board, to layer in solution focus and make it even more dynamic for them.
Thank you.
I find it extremely useful, and I'm relatively new to the virtual space, particularly running workshops. So I really can find it. Yeah, I think I'm going to use it a lot. So thank you very much for sharing.
Some of the downsides I've seen of lean coffee is the discussion can sometimes be quite shallow because of the time box, because of the pressure to get on to the next topic. Sometimes you find you move through the topics too quickly. And what I found you can do then, if there's one topic that takes up maybe half an hour, you spin that off into a theme for another whole lean coffee. And then you can actually spend more time on that topic. Yeah, but I do find I often feel slightly unsatisfied is a good way of putting it because we didn't get into the depth of discussion that we wanted.
One secondary benefit is you just get to know each other a bit better. I mean, especially in a work environment where people just work all the time. They'll go and have a coffee together and talk, you know, meaningless chat. What you do is, by doing this, is inject a meaningful topic, even if it's only for half an hour and it's very light on, but people start to get to know each other. They're talking about something other than work. And I think, you know, you learn more about someone in an hour of play than you do a lifetime of work as it goes. And that's where if you can explore, you know, people's thinkings in different areas, even if it's only for a short period of time, I think that secondary benefit of people getting to know each other a bit better and being more comfortable in each other's presence and all that, and a bit more open, is a good benefit. No, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, mate, for pulling it together.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you. It was my first time I joined in this kind of Zoom go together, and I was a bit curious how it will be. So I felt very happy to be there. So I liked the topic, and I recognized that we did make this topic discussion and done at the cabaret at the Soul Summer Retreat, and it was very fun. And I got a lot of ideas or links I like to continue to find more depth in it. Thank you very much. I was very happy with this call.
Yeah, for myself, Rod, what I've had the same kind of feeling of discussions being cut off is for me, this could be a way that you say, right, this is the top priority. We'll talk until we're done, and then you set up another meeting where you then take the next priority. It kind of gives you a continuing set of things to talk about as a team. So that's just an idea. I don't know if it would work. It may go completely against the
No, actually, I'll see if I can find it. But the lean coffee that I mentioned that's been running every Tuesday morning in Melbourne for more than 10 years now, they've evolved from the initial 3 columns to have a number of additional columns. And they have things called, they have a column called zombies. And these are cards that are left over from the previous session. And if the person who proposed that actually turns up again, they go back into the topics list to be voted on again to see if they're included. The other column that they've introduced is newcomers. So somebody who's never been to a lean coffee before, they get first dibs. So they get prioritised, their topics get prioritised beyond anyone else's. So yeah, I'll see if I can find this LinkedIn post about just how this format has evolved over 10 years with just a weekly meetup. But yeah, there's definitely many ways you can play with it.
Yeah. And do you use it always in a whole round setting, or do you go also in subgroups ever?
Sometimes we do split the table, as I mentioned. When you get more than about 9-10 people, not everyone's going to get the airtime that they want, so you may split it. But if you ended up having, I don't know, 30 people in a room, you'd be better off using a different format. You just,
okay.
This is actually just for small groups, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, thank you, because this meeting is and this format's enabled me to meet many of you that I haven't before, and on the chat list, having all of those links to those new ideas is excellent. So thank you.
Yeah, I second Kathy with trying it out. in the session. It gives a much better understanding, and also very much better ideas on how to implement it for myself. So I think sometimes you are in meeting, you just need to be efficient. And instead of people say, oh, if we don't have much time, I don't bring the topic in at all. Give the space for actually letting people bring in the topics. And what I do, and not in this case, but in similar settings, is to tell people to consider what you want to be different when you bring in this topic. So imagine all these, the most intelligent people in the whole world are here today in this meeting right now, using them as an oracle or whatever you would call it. Then what would you be able to do different when you bring in that topic that actually sharpens people's focus on getting out of it and say, now time's up. We had 5 minutes for this one. What have you got? Do we continue? Do you take this topic outside of this room and talk with individual people? What do you do? Mm-hmm. To me, it helps a bit when people really start focusing on what do I want, and sometimes they interrupt and say, okay, now you're bringing in something, but that's completely different of what I actually hope for. So very interesting, very inspiring, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for coming along on a Sunday morning or Sunday evening or whatever time it is, wherever you are. And I'd really like to thank Rod for bringing on this lean coffee. Personally, I loved hearing the way of doing it, as Jesper just said, but also I loved hearing all the ideas for solution focus, which is always a bonus to get new ideas.